what is the role of formal education for the young Christian?
You know, formal education is a good thing, and I think for a lot of people it is extremely important. Having said that, I don't think it's the answer. I think sometimes we think that education, as long as we can educate people, we'll be okay. Well, no, that's not the case. You can end up with a highly educated buffoon. You know, education in its place is very helpful, but it's not just the education that's necessary. When it comes to the Christian community, you know, in our work of discipling people and helping to develop and hone and support God's future leaders develop, you know, there are many people who will maybe not need formal education. But when that happens, so often you'll find in that person's life the natural desire or the way God has wired them. They love to read. They love to talk to people. They love to evaluate themselves. They like constructive criticism. They intentionally place themselves in contexts where they can grow. If you run across a person who has no interest in talking to people about various ideas, has no interest whatsoever in being critiqued, they don't want people's feedback, they could care less about books or journals or magazine articles, that person is actually demonstrating an arrogancy that will cripple them in a role of leadership. For most people, that is what we are helped with in formal education. We have the opportunity to be challenged by our peers as well as those who have spent years studying the subjects that we're supposed to learn. We interact with books and articles that have various perspectives that will be very helpful for us that we've never considered before. It teaches us how to think critically, how to interact with each other in a way that is truly helpful. It instills a form of discipline as well. When we're sitting in a class, or we're sitting at home doing a class online, there's an expectation of discipline that is built into that system. You're assigned these 4 books to read, and you're going to write a book review on each one of those. There's built-in discipline to help you become more of a self-disciplined individual. There are so many people who have great ideas and who have tremendous ability that produce nothing for lack of self-discipline. We live in a very self-distracting day. We have so many distractions, and we can be so self-distracting that I think that is where formal education can also help to act as a antidote in many ways to the fact that we're very distracted. And if we don't develop self-discipline, we will really produce very little in this life for Christ. And that's ultimately what we're talking about. So I think that we've got to be careful, number one, of elevating formal education to the status of it is the key. It is the answer to the problem. Because it's not. But on the other hand, we also have to protect ourselves from the perspective that education is an enemy. You know, there are pockets within Christianity that operate very anti-intellectually. If you go to any kind of school, if you get any kind of schooling, then you're going to be, you know, you're going to be one of those liberal people that you know, couldn't tear their way out of a brown paper bag if their life depended on it, right? So we've got to protect against making education the key, the answer. We've got to protect ourselves from believing that education is an enemy. But we need to recognize, along with those two, that education is extremely helpful. And ultimately, whether it's formal in the sense of going to an accredited institution or taking courses online from an accredited or even a non-accredited institution. We all have the responsibility to be students of the Word of God. So in that sense, whether you're talking formal or informal, we all had better be driven to study and learn and know as much about the Word of God as possible. If we're gonna be leaders, you've got to know how to lead. You've got to know where you're leading the people to. You got to know that as you're taking these people on this journey with Christ, what that journey is supposed to look like. So, learning is extremely important. I think that a leader ought to be a lifelong learner, whether it's formally or informally. I think you really ought to be a lifelong learner. But that's just my opinion.
That's what we're here for.